I got a text from Karen. We figured out the glitch there is why everybody from all the Parkway staff was wanting to get in. We sent the wrong link to the Parkway staff. So hopefully they are getting the right one. I was like, why is Andy Tosh just trying to get in the executive session again? So, and Kayla Silverthrone and everybody else from Parkway. So hopefully, let's give people a little bit of time to get the right one and come on over here. Andy, are you back?
I don't think I see him.
I have Danielle, Molly, Teresa. I don't see Tamika or Andy yet.
I'm here. I just have to leave 2 seconds.
Yep, we're gonna give a few minutes break because we had the wrong link out there. So everybody who, if you can hear me, we're gonna start in probably a few minutes. I know we're a little bit late, but we had a technical issue with the wrong link being sent out to half of our staff. So please bear with us.
We have like 2 minutes, Larry, or something, or?
Yeah, I'll call everybody back at like 6:40, so.
Okay.
Good evening again to any community members who are and staff members who are joining us. I need to apologize. We had a link issue that we sent out to the Parkway staff that had a typo in it. So we're going to give them a minute. We just sent it to the Parkway staff again so that they can join. So if you have friends who are at Parkway, you can text them saying, go to your email right now, and the correct link is on there. So we're starting in just a few minutes here. Mika, Teresa, I see Danielle. Andy, have you been able to make it back in?
I'm here.
Okay. So I wasn't sure if you heard me before. We had sent the wrong link out to Parkway staff, so I'm giving them a minute to get back on.
But once upon a time, we'd send people to the wrong room, the real room.
But I think I see Tamika's here, Molly's here, Teresa's here, Danielle's here. So why don't we get started, and as people come on, we can, I don't think people are here to talk about, I think they want to hear about the reopening plan, which is not for a minute or two, so.
Okay, so if we've got everyone here, then we're going to reconvene into open session. And our first item on the agenda after item D, which is to reconvene, is item E, which is the consent motion for approval of item F, which is agenda approval.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, then is there any discussion? If not, oh shoot, I didn't realize Tamika's not there, but I think that she may have had to step away. So we'll do a roll call vote. Danielle Bailey,
We're voting on the agenda?
agenda
Aye.
approval.
Aye.
Teresa Steen,
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, I approve.
Tamika is excused. Molly,
Aye.
and Andy votes aye. So the motion carries. Item number 2A, approved teacher resignation under new business. Larry, take it away.
Sorry, I have too many pieces of paper on my desk. First item of business, new business is, unfortunately, we have a resignation for you. Erin Norris, a long-time Glendale resident and great 7th grade special education teacher, has chosen to leave Glendale and move on in her career. So I need to recommend that the board approve the resignation of Erin Norris, our 7th grade special education teacher, effective August 7th of 2020.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
second?
Second
Okay.
from Teresa.
Is there any discussion? All right, seeing
I just
none.
want to
I'll
say
do
that
roll- Yeah, go ahead.
she'll be missed. She was a great teacher, great friend, great community member. Sorry to see her go, but wish her well.
Amen to that.
Very well said. Thank you. All right, then, on a roll call vote,
So,
Danielle Bailey.
Andy, I'm
Oh,
sorry
sorry.
to interrupt before you do the roll call vote. I just wanted to remind the community members that we took the chat box out because we didn't want people just chatting. So if they wanted to make a comment about an agenda item or wait till visitor participation, they can do that by raising their hand on the bottom of their screen where you see it says raise hand if you go into the participants. So with that, you can, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. I'll just give everyone a second. It was a good reminder. All right, Danielle Bailey,
Aye.
Molly,
Aye.
Teresa,
Aye.
Tamika,
Aye.
and I vote aye. The motion carries. We wish Ms. Norris nothing but the best of luck. Thank you.
So we also have 2 new teachers coming in, or a teacher and a half specifically. We have a full-time special ed teacher. That's not going to be the 7th grade special ed teacher. We're actually, Sadale Washington, who is a paraprofessional in the district, has finished his teaching degree and is going back to get his special ed degree. Great person, worked really hard, I think has been part of the Glen Hills family already, so it's an easy transition. Will become the new 4th grade special ed teacher. I'm recommending that Mr. Sadale Washington be offered a 1.0 contract for 4th grade. And then we also had a music teacher leave at the end of last year, and Mr. Jason Meisner is being offered that halftime position for the vocal music program here at Glen Hill. So I would recommend that the board approve contracts for Sadale Washington, 4th grade special education teacher, and Jason Meisner, vocal music teacher at Glen Hills for the 2020-2021 school year.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will do roll call vote. Danielle,
Aye.
Molly,
Hi.
Teresa,
Hi.
Tamika,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. The motion carries. I'd like to welcome our new teachers. And so thank you very much for becoming part of our district.
Item C is approving the school reopening plan. The board was given our 2020-21 school year reopening handbook or plan. My recommendation is that we would start in phase 2 for our Ready, Set, Go meetings, which would happen September 1 through September 4, that first week of school. That we would stay in phase 2 for the first week of virtual instruction for all students. The reason behind that is to make sure that every student has their number one classroom, homeroom teacher, and that small group can meet for, especially for the social emotional needs that kids will have, and that we would move to phase 3 on September 15th, or I'm sorry, September 14th, which is a Monday, where we would bring in small groups of students that would need individual support. And then basically the grading or gating criteria after that, we would stay in stage 3 until we get notice from the North Shore Health Department that we have lower than 100 per 100,000 cases of COVID-19 in the city of Glendale, since that is the majority of our students. So with that, I'm not going to read the 40-page handbook to you. You have it if you have specific questions or comments. I'll leave this one up to the board.
Yeah, I have, so just, I think broad questions that I need to sort of understand in terms of like decision-making, which we've discussed, what the board roles, what the superintendent role will be. But the biggest question I have, so the metrics in the reopening handbook, and you said we would not move to stage 4 and less than 100 per 100,000. Do you know, would our burden level be low or moderate if we were under 100?
100 is from 50 to 100 is moderate. Under 50
Okay.
is low.
Okay. And so my question is, how will the decision be made to move out of stage 3? Will it be a recommendation from you that would be then given to the board for the board to approve?
Actually, that's a great question. Thank you. Excuse me. Yes, it would be. I don't foresee this happening as, oh, I'm going to wake up on a Tuesday, go, hey, 199, let's bring everybody in. It would be the next board meeting. And again, this is a two-week rolling average. So it would take at least, once we met the criteria for that 2-week rolling average, it'd be at the next board meeting that I would recommend that, and we'd probably pick a date. So, in my mind, let's say on October 1st, we reach the gating criteria that we're talking about. At that next board meeting, the next committee of the whole, I would recommend let's start on October 15th, provided that the numbers have stayed the same. So we wouldn't start on an overnight basis. We'd give parents and staff plenty of time to make sure that they know what's going to happen.
Are we going to have any set time for reviewing this? Or like, are we going to go back to at any point in time and say, I don't know, it's the end of September, should we look at this, or at the end of October and we should look at this?
I think we will be looking at this at every board meeting that we have. I'm not sure if we're doing weekly board meetings like we've been doing in August, but we do have 2 board meetings scheduled for every month. And I really think, I know there are other districts who are putting dates down saying that they want to bring kids in on October 5th, or they want to bring in on September 20th. I think my personal recommendation is that we actually listen to the scientists and to the North Shore Health Department and use their criteria. I'm working with them along with Nicolay, along with Shorewood, Whitefish Bay, Mequon, Fox Point, Brown Deer. We're all working together, having the same criteria for what they are recommending to me. Each school board can do as they please, though, and each community can do what they feel is best for their community. My recommendation to you is that we should use their information and be as safe as possible. We're starting virtually. We know that we need some small groups of kids to come in. but bringing in a full classroom, I don't think is appropriate until the science tells us that it's appropriate. But as a board, you can say, hey, we're going to look at this September 15th and October 15th. That's really up to you.
Well, so I would like to talk about, and I think the one thing that, frankly, that I like to point out is that, you start out with phase one, maybe we can call it even ground zero, which was the difference between, regular learning, really where we're towards emergency learning. And I think that calling it emergency learning and saying that that was a phase that was in the past, both, gives us a sense of progress, but also, encapsulate what it is that we were dealing with, last spring. So I like the phase approach and how it starts, but I'm confused, I guess, maybe a little bit troubled by the idea of having a separate phase two and phase three, because I guess what I took away from some of our discussions, in our last few meetings is that the board wants to make sure that what we're doing is providing services to those in need, however it is that we define that, as soon as possible. And I'm not very comfortable, I'm glad that we're doing all virtual, but I got the sense from the board that the board wanted to make sure that those higher needs kids would be serviced. And so that might be special ed, that might be, disadvantage, there might be, some other factors in that. So I guess the first point that I want to make is I really think that we shouldn't call it phase two and phase three, but I think that we should have phase three, as the starting point. Call it merge phase two, phase three, whatever it is, or just call it phase three, phase two, which, again, I don't want to start getting all confusing here, but we should be having virtual, but we should also be addressing student needs for those with special educational needs or other criteria, which also, we need to define. We need to have that from the beginning, out the gate. That's what I think. And so I am wondering, I guess, if there's any other thoughts on that. But Larry, I mean, how do we address these kids in need if we don't have defined criteria for going from, phase two to phase three?
Tamika wants to jump in, but my quick answer to that is the Ready, Set, Go meetings is what's going to allow our teachers to know exactly which kids are going to need the services. And by providing 1 week of virtual instruction for all students, that builds that community of students for that teacher. And in our opinion, from the administrative team, having those 4 days, the day after Labor Day, and then that's a 4-day week, September 8th through 11th, I believe, off the top of my head, gives every classroom teacher 4 days of virtual, just to build that classroom atmosphere that I think is important for every child. And then starting on the 14th, bringing kids in. I don't disagree with you. I want kids in the buildings right away. And if you say, let's bring kids in on September 8th, I'm not going to disagree with you and say, let's start at phase three.
The other thing is, what are the criteria that teachers are going to be using? I'm sorry, Danielle, but what are the criteria that teachers are going to be using to identify who these are? Because we intentionally didn't limit it to special education.
Nope, it's our most vulnerable kids. I think that's the Ready, Set, Go meeting. I think, first of all, we are a small district. We have built great relationships with our families. I think our principals know which families are in most need. I think our special ed staff knows which kids are in the most need. We've been lucky enough to have free food service all summer long. We know that we've had to deliver lunches to families. So I think we know quite a few of our children that I would call the most vulnerable, but I think those Ready, Set, Go meetings might identify a few more. I know Tamika has been very patient.
Larry, when I called you to clarify this, I thought you gave kind of a good answer on this, in the sense of just because we're calling it phase two doesn't necessarily mean some parts of phase three won't be in phase two. And what I mean by that is phase two, we're starting everybody virtually so we can get a feel of what goes on, who needs what. And just because we have moved sorta into some of phase three, which is having the most vulnerable kids, or the people with the kids with students, I should start saying, with special needs, doesn't necessarily mean, it just means that we're taking some components of phase three and putting them into 2 because that's what we need at that time. Is that how you explained it to me, Larry, a little bit?
I'm trying to be as consistent as possible, but yes.
But that's how I think it is. I mean, I'm not trying to say you were switching it. I thought that that was a good answer in how we're doing this, in the sense of just because we're calling it phase 2 doesn't necessarily mean components of phase 3 won't be in phase 2 because of the kids who are most vulnerable.
I agree with that, yes.
So the thing that's been popping out to me is that in the handbook, under virtual learning, it says scheduled in-person access to staff. And I think that just simply adding that language in phase 2 and giving ourselves the flexibility to schedule the counseling, therapy, and as you said, work with individual families to assess, IEPs and 504s would make sense in phase 2 and alleviate some of the concern that we have about kids not receiving the appropriate services out of the gate. I think that's just sort of language. But in phase 3, I guess I'm trying to understand when you start adding students beyond ones that need therapies or counseling or specific services that they would schedule to have in person, like you said, determining perhaps the vulnerable learners. Is it correct that we would limit that to small groups of 5 or less in phase 3, or is phase 3 the beginning of blended learning where you would see classes of 15?
And how I foresee it, phase 3 would probably be groups of, because of the size of our building, I don't even want to call them groups. It'd probably be limited to about 50 students at any given time at the max, because you can, in our schools, we can socially distance that many students without putting any staff or students in a vulnerable position, in my opinion.
50 students per building?
Yes.
Or
And again, it's tough to put a number. I mean, if we end up at 51 one day or 40, I mean, I think what phase 3 to me is about is kids who need extra support are either scheduled to come in, and it might be they're coming in for a therapy session for physical therapy, and they're in the building for 15 minutes, get their therapy, and they leave right away. There are other kids who might have to be in the building, and I think it's going to come up in a little bit about using our daycare facilities, Milestones in Glendale Heights, where there can be up to 10 students per grade level that both of our daycare centers are willing to help virtually teach. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. We're the virtual teachers. They would facilitate the virtual learning at their daycares. Now, Milestones is at Parkway. Glendale Heights is at Good Hope, but we're also anticipating and hoping to have a Glendale Heights and Milestones classroom at Glen Hills for our own staff too. For our own.
So you're not counting those. You're not counting those children in the 50, the number of students.
Yes, I would be counting those. If Milestones has 50 kids in the building every day, those would be our most. Those are the kids that we would be servicing. Because we have an agreement with Milestones in Glendale Heights that we get to help choose which 50 kids they can take up to. And we're not sure if they're going to get 50. We're not sure if that many families are interested in this yet. So
I guess I'm just trying to delineate, because if the ask is that we were to approve the full reopening plan, there's the virtual learning is considered phase 1 and phase 2. And for some reason, my phase 3 doesn't have a label, but I think phase 3 was considered blended learning. Is that correct?
yes.
Okay, so then I'm looking at what your classrooms look like, what you have listed, and you have virtual learning, and we have students and staff can meet in small groups of 5 or less. And then in blended learning, we have classrooms will be arranged approximately 15 to be spaced apart. So I'm just trying to understand I feel like I'm confused.
Okay, my phase 3, as I see it, would be Yes, 5 or less in any given classroom. So if I'm a second grade teacher, I would never have more than 5 students in my classroom. Now, we may have a total of 50 kids at Parkway, but we'd never have more than 5 students in any given classroom. And how we've set it up with Glendale Heights and with Milestones is that we have separate areas, completely different areas that they can use in the building that they will maintain social distancing. And then one of our staffs could actually go and help them at their place. So we don't even need to move our own students into our own classrooms, that they would stay at Milestones. With the exceptions of, physical therapy or occupational therapy, those would come in and go right to the PT room or the OT room or something to that effect. So I don't see, because our teachers will be teaching virtually, I don't think it's appropriate to have 3 kids in their classroom while they're teaching virtually, because it doesn't work very well.
What happens once we move from there to blended learning? Will Milestones and Glendale Heights still be in the building?
Milestones rents the Parkway building for before and after school daycare. Glendale Heights rents Good Hope School. So I think once we get to phase 4, where we're bringing in entire classrooms, or phase 5 or 6, then no, then the daycare wouldn't be appropriate because we're using the building.
So they would go back from Glen Hills to
Right.
Parkway and then to Good Hope.
So what we're trying, in my mind, we're trying to build contingency plans. I think if you asked me, and I know that this gets taken out of context sometimes, if I had to guess today, I don't see us getting to phase 4 or phase 5 or phase 6 anytime soon, unfortunately. I hope I'm wrong. And I hope that we can have full classes in the building, by October. I just don't foresee that happening. I think this COVID-19 pandemic is very real. But I think we have to be prepared. If I'm wrong, I want kids in schools quickly, but we also have to be prepared to help our most vulnerable kids all the way through winter break, in my mind.
So Larry, when it comes to figuring out what we're going to do to go from one stage to the next, there's questions that I guess I have about what preparations need to be taking place. And I went through the guide, and there's a lot of, I don't want to say general talk, but there's a lot of general talk about making schools safe by I don't know, turning off the bubblers or making school safe by wiping things down and so on and so forth. Do we have a specific list of practices that we're going to take, upon school starting in phase 2, whatever we want to call it, upon the start of the school year, and then also, in addition to that, I mean, obviously criteria is another part of this, if we're going to the next stage, but then not just those criteria if we're going to the next stage, but what we do when the next stage starts.
Yeah, I think in the middle of the handbook, basically the Health and Safety Committee, when we went through this, and it's added into the handbook right in the middle, it gets very specific. It talks about face coverings, that face coverings are mandated for all. It talks about field trips and safety drills, classroom layout, what it looks like in a blended and in an in-person learning, classroom capacity, classroom cleaning, getting into the specifics of how often, what does Allied Arts looks like in a blended, guest speakers and volunteers, general school areas. In here, we talk about lunch periods, passing times, transitions. The Health and Safety Committee really dug deep into, let's get very specific about what it looks like if there's 100 kids in the building, what it looks like if there's 500 kids in the building. And so that's really built into this handbook.
So, but maybe I missed something there. But so, for example, we're talking about lunch service, right? And I don't remember exactly what it said in there, but I didn't see something that said, for example, we will have grab and go lunch service instead of typical lunch service.
I have it right here. It says in the blended cafeterias will be spaced out for social distance eating. Lunch pickup can occur with staggered approach. Lunch can occur in the classrooms or other areas in each building with students in smaller groups. In-person learning, so stage 4 or 6, cafeterias will be spaced out for social distance eating. Lunch pickup, which again is grab and go, maybe we can be very specific about that, but we've already worked with our food service company, knowing that there isn't the old school of, it's grab and go.
So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't say grab and go. It doesn't say where the lunch is going to be, for example. I mean, there are some, I guess, holes that need to be
It
plugged.
does say cafeterias will be spaced out. I think the difference is each building, we had to be trying to do one handbook. Glen Hill's cafeteria can be spaced out, and you can probably get an entire grade level completely socially distanced in the commons and cafeteria. At Parkway, probably not. So we were probably, and that's why it says lunch can occur in the classrooms or in other areas in each building with students in smaller groups. So I think we tried to write it so that we tried to be as specific as possible. Water fountains is another thing, that water fountains will be turned off, except that we have water fountains where you can fill your own water bottle. So filling a water bottle is appropriate, but drinking out of a water fountain isn't. So luckily, Mr. Beckman had those replaced a few years ago. So we can fill water bottles without, and turn off the water fountain, so you can't just use it as a water
Is
fountain.
that safe? Because, I'm hearing all these things, you go to a coffee place, you can't have a reusable cup, for example. I mean, so if I guess in terms of using refillable water bottles, can we have cups instead of, letting people use refillable water bottles? Because I don't know what the hygiene factor is for taking water bottle caps off and using the bubblers to fill them up, as opposed to, I don't know, just having a paper cup or something. But I mean, there's a focus elsewhere in here on using disposable plasticware, in our social eating. I mean, everything's in general. I mean, no one's using anything reusable. So, isn't there a problem using reusable water bottles?
From what the I'm not saying social safety committee made it sound like, and what we've learned from other districts is water bottles are appropriate to use, so.
So I feel like there are broader sort of substantive, big sort of policy things we need to focus on. And I've read through the details of the, safety for each, and we can get into that, but I trust I have some trust there that we are prioritizing safety and do want to know more about that. But I really feel like our charge is to sort of think about these phases, what we need to know about them in order to approve some or all of them, or this plan in general. That's kind of how I'm feeling. And I still feel like there's unresolved issues and questions there. So I just want to say that phase 3 for me, it is listed as blended. And I don't think that actually coincides with the details that you've provided in terms of what class layout and all those specifics under the virtual, blended, and then in-person look like. So for me, I would suggest phase 3 being considered virtual learning or virtual learning plus. And I would add to phase 2 scheduled access to staff in person, because I think it sounds like we're saying that is a possibility and that is flexible, for as it's listed under virtual learning. Those are a couple sort of big ticket changes that I feel like I would feel more comfortable with phase 2 and phase 3 being rolled out as we understand more about, with looking at it with those criteria that you said, Larry.
So going back to how this started is kind of what Andy asked is, wait, I can bring this back. Our next board meeting is August 26th, which is next Wednesday. I can bring those changes back, as you say, and so that again, this is a living document that we're going to have to change. In here, we have our current schedules for elementary, K3, our current 4-5 schedules, our current 6-8 schedules, and I kind of said this to the board. We anticipate that these are great schedules and everything's going to work wonderfully, but we also understand that it might not work, and so we have to be flexible, and so we'll be bringing that back to the board each time. I'm assuming each board meeting we'll keep updating this handbook, because we're going to find things that we just didn't think about.
Yeah,
Well,
and go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I was
Dave.
just going to say, if we are asked to approve the handbook, or at this meeting, if we were to approve phase 3 as a blended phase that you want to start on the 14th, according to this handbook, that phase looks like up to 15 kids in a classroom, which is not what I hear you saying. So it just doesn't seem like this handbook is reflecting what you're saying. And I wouldn't want to approve it if it was inaccurate. But I do want to, have some solid decisions and charges for you to go forward with.
And, I agree with you, Danielle, on that. I mean, for me, I think that what we need to do is we need to spend what it is that we need to do to get going. And, I didn't see, and, again, maybe I missed the specificity, but, I think that what people want is something that's going to get them off and running on day one, as well as have an idea, what's going to happen down the road. I know that there was an email about, for example, registration, but there were some things that weren't, completely together. And so I think that, we need to have, information, and I know we're going to have some discussion later about the registration process and the fees, when school starts, what those ready, set, go days are going to look like when they start and what the times are going to be. Then, what's going to happen in that week of September 8th to the 11th. And so, I think that, getting to day one, getting to phase two, or day one, whatever you want to call it, we need to know what it takes us to get there and what it looks like on that day. And I would rather, that we have some clear idea of what those things are, that we need to get to. It's not just about, our next meeting is at August 26th, but that meeting is the Wednesday before, the school year is supposed to start. So, I'd like to get, those things firmed up so that people know what they're heading into. And then I guess address everything else maybe in stages. I mean, you're right, Larry. I think that we're going to be going through this in chunks and going back and looking at it. But I really want to, just, cement what it is that we're going to be doing on day one.
Kind of a broad question. I'm not sure exactly how to answer it, but I would say that the schedules that are included in the handbook would be, that's what we're going through. And I just pulled up Parkway's schedule right now, that we're anticipating students being online starting at 8:30 a.m. for a daily meeting, morning meeting. Literacy class for all K-5 through 3rd grade, going from 9 a.m. until 10:30. That obviously that's not just a sit and get literacy program. We don't expect kids to sit there for an hour and a half. That they would have an Allied Arts group, that we actually have a scheduled lunch, and we're working with our food service so that we can do a grab and go pick up lunch here at this building. So if families need to grab lunch, they can do so. Allied Arts and Math again in the afternoon. So it's a regular scheduled day for all students K through 3. Same thing with 4 or 5, that they're going to start with the morning meeting. We've put a lot of time into the saying about the social emotional aspect of it. And that at Glen Hills, the school day starts at 8 a.m. And finishes at 2 p.m. And so again, there's some built-in time for students to talk specifically to kids. The middle school also with their schedule. So I see us as, I think the difference, and we've talked about this, the emergency learning that happened in the spring was chaotic for all. It was chaotic for our staff. It was chaotic for parents and students. And I think what we had was a plan to start on day one. Again, my idea of day one is really September 8th, because September 1 through 4th, the social emotional committee really made a point to say that every family has to have the opportunity to meet with their current teacher. And to make that work, that's why we need that September 1 through September 4th. Those meetings would be scheduled by the building principals and building teachers. We already have the link where we can send it out. So you're a parent of a 7th grader, Mr. Franklin, that you would get an email from the 7th grade teachers and Ms. Tucker saying, here are the times, basically you sign up for when you can do this Ready, Set, Go meeting during this week.
But the process isn't described in the handbook, is it? The process of we're going to do a Ready, Set, Go meeting. So this is what's going to be. We can be in person, we can be virtual. Let's figure out how we're going to do it. So all I'm saying is that people want to have, an easy, readable guide to say, this is what I need to expect. this is what September 1st is going to look like. This is what my day is going to look like on September 1st is when the meeting is. September 8th, we're going to have our first quote unquote day one, and day one, you know, they're going to be in front of the computer. I mean, there's a point where you mentioned September 1st, but it needs some of those additional details in there, I guess, is my point. Or at least we need to have that. Maybe it doesn't need to be, you know, as much as a handbook right now, but an FAQ sheet to just address, you know, these key points. I mean, as a parent with a child in the district, I want to know what's going to happen with my kid and when. And so for me, just
But
please.
Mr. Franklin, I can't tell you what's going to happen until the board says this is what we can do. So that we're playing, it's a catch-22 game. You want me to say, all right, this is what's going to happen. And then if I will tell you this is what's going to happen, then I get criticized because I made the decision this is going to happen and it hasn't been approved by the board. And then I get community members and staff members who are mad at me. So now I'm bringing the handbook to you saying, approve this damn handbook, excuse my language, so that my principals and staff members can start calling you to set up these meetings. So it's a chicken and a hen kind of conflict right now, in my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah, well, that's kind of why I want to really focus on the handbook or the plan that we need to approve for you and staff and administration to like get those details and get ready to push those out. When you talked about schedules though, so on Friday, will that just be considered asynchronous learning for all grade levels since Friday is office hours, professional development?
Yes.
Or no, asynchronous, so there will be something expected on that day.
Yes, it isn't sit at home and watch television, so.
Okay, and then, so the schedules, if you look at it, I don't think this is what it's saying, but I just want to make sure. So like for the K4 schedule, it looks like there's like 2 hours of online scheduled time, and it increases as you go up. K5 through 3rd is like 4 to 5 hours of scheduled learning that seems like it's online, but I'm wondering if curriculum or instruction is actually like expecting kids to be synchronous on their computers for 4 to 5 hours, you know, at those levels and going up.
I think in this, Jenica Westfall has worked with our staff that from DPI, I think there's an amount of time kind of per grade clusters. You know, it should really be about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And Jenica, if you're here, feel free to jump in and correct me. The younger kids, really about an hour and a half to 2 hours of actual online time, but they can be scheduled for the 5 hours because some of that time might be the teacher saying, okay, now you go out and you go read this book, or it's Allied Arts time, so you're gonna go run around that tree and come back, you know. So the parents have a schedule saying, we want kids to be available at this time, but it could, does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, so then it would be more to the specific teacher, to the students to set those more varying schedules with individual students. Okay. I have a question about attendance.
Yep.
Okay, so it looks like from the virtual learning guide sent to the staff and then just what I'm seeing in the handbook that attendance will be taken daily at the middle school level and also at the elementary level, but it seems like there's flexibility built in there for the asynchronous learners. So case by case, I want to make sure that or know what will happen for the students we know are going to be asynchronous, say most of the time or some of the time, that their attendance is not going to be, that's not going to negatively impact.
So there's a state law that mandates attendance by school. So we have to follow that state law.
Okay.
With that said, the discussions that I've had from a superintendent standpoint is that DPI will give you multiple waivers at this time because everybody is working through a pandemic. So I think from a Glendale standpoint with our community values is the reason we're taking attendance is to make sure that every child is getting what they need. So if we find out that kids aren't logging on at all, we need to get a hold of those families to ask about what we need to do to make sure that they can be successful. So that's how I see attendance being, that it isn't going to be used to call the Milwaukee County District Attorney and say, hey, give this person a ticket for being truant. We wouldn't do that.
Okay.
Along those lines, Larry, I know we have a third Friday in September count. How's that going to work if we're A, having asynchronous learners, and or B, on a blended schedule, or B or C, Friday is not
So
learning day, so to speak?
the actual law to that, we're going to talk a little bit more about that at school funding, but the actual law about that third Friday is if the district can prove that a child was here at least one day prior to the third Friday, and you're anticipating that they will be here at least one day after the third Friday, you get to count them. That was a very long discussion with DPI and the governor's office to make sure that school districts aren't getting penalized because of the pandemic. So they're giving us a little leeway. However, and Tamika and I had this conversation, if families choose to homeschool and not use our virtual learning, we don't get to count them, and that could have a long-term funding effect on the district.
And you'll go into more detail later about that?
Yep.
Okay.
And then I just wanted to say, with respect to specificity about what every day is going to include for the child, I personally, we don't get that during a non-pandemic school day. So to ask for that kind of specificity when, I granted this is a whole new concept of learning, but to ask for that kind of specificity from a professional teacher, kids go to school beginning the school year every year excited because they don't necessarily know exactly who they're going to meet, what their teacher's going to be like, what they're going to learn, etc. They don't have a specific list of exactly what's going to happen during the day. So to me, I don't feel like that's as necessary as some might think.
Well, and I do think it comes down to that relationship the student has with the teachers. And so, and I think that's where parents and the teacher, that Ready, Set, Go meeting is going to be very important about, this is my specific schedule for your student. And if it doesn't work for your student or your family, then what are we going to do to make it work for you? And more than ever, that relationship between teacher and student, that's always been the most important thing for student learning. That's been proven research after research. This year more than any, it's going to be true too.
I have questions about the technology and the training. So in the handbook, it just lists Google Classroom, but earlier Jenica, I believe, mentioned that Seesaw would be used. So it says that there will be virtual trainings for families around Google Classroom. I didn't know if Seesaw was an intentional omission or if that's not being used. And go ahead.
Google Classroom is going to be our district platform, but embedded in Google Classroom, you can use Seesaw. So
Okay.
if teachers plan on using Seesaw, then you'd still be embedded. And yes, we do have training set up. Thank you, PTO and Jenica. They've set up several. I know that we're going to have several meetings that first, either late August or early September. I don't know off the top of my head. I know that Jenica is working with PTO to have both in-person support and a virtual training.
Okay. Well, I know that the instructional committee had talked about a virtual, like a guidebook for families. Do you know if that's also in the works?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I think it might be completed. I'm not positive, but.
Okay, cool. Because that wasn't listed. So thinking about tech issues, has that been planned for in terms of like, if a family has a specific issue in the moment, do we have like, what's the process going to be for that? Or, I mean, that might be in the handbook, so maybe that's too specific.
I don't know if it's that specific in the handbook. I think that goes back to our tech department. Keith Lehman, who's our technician per se, is on staff every day, Monday through Friday. So if it's a quick answer, you can just send them an email or a text. If it's a broken computer, obviously, then it's a broken Chromebook, and we'll get you a new one as quickly as possible. So.
Okay.
It
Can I
kinda
just
depends.
jump in, Larry? Sorry.
Sure.
And we do have a website that will be set up specifically for that, parents and families, caregivers can, go to the website and put in a ticket, and there'll be a phone number. And when we're ready to go live with all that, once the tech is passed out, then it'll all be on our website as well. So along with the books, the trainings, videos, you name it, all
Okay.
there. Yep.
And who's in charge of this is on our district website.
It will be, yep. But
So
New
who would
Live
be,
is gonna be running that piece of it.
okay. So there'd be somebody who'd be sort of regularly updating
Correct.
and checking that.
So-
Okay.
And that is also part of the plan for the Ready, Set, Go meeting, is that we will have all the information, all the technology, all the workbooks for pickup by parents at that Ready, Set, Go meeting. So we'll have separate boxes. So this will be, Jenica Westfall's Chromebook, and here's her reading book that she needs. Here's her math workbook that she needs. Here's her art supplies because she is art first trimester. So we're putting all that together as an individual box that you will be given at the Ready, Set, Go meeting also. And then in addition to meeting your teacher and building that relationship up. So that's the plan today.
I don't want to take up all the air. I know I have a lot of questions, apologies, but the Ready, Set, Go conferences then are in person, or the option to be in person? What will happen for families that don't want to meet in person? And is that going to coincide with still not having more than so many people or kids in the building? If
So
you're trying to have them.
We are encouraging in person because the social emotional committee believes that an in-person socially distanced meeting is wonderful. But as both principals have told their staff, that if a parent says, I don't feel comfortable doing this, we'll do it through Zoom, and then also get the materials to your house somehow, some way.
What
So
time during?
it's more of a parent decision if it's in person, not a staff decision. So the staff will be ready to do in person unless the parent says, I don't want to do that.
Are there going to be evening hours available too, or is it daytime?
I don't think the staff has heard this yet, but we're giving them flexibility on that entire week, that there's no other scheduled meeting. So we want them to be flexible. So if a parent says, I really want to meet at 6:30, we're asking our staff to meet at 6:30 that given time, but obviously take other time off during the week.
So are all these protocols going to be in place for parents who are going to come into the building, socially distant?
Yep.
I don't know, markers and spacing, arrows for traffic flow, bathrooms,
Yep.
bubbler.
That's what we are working on right now, as a matter of fact. So kudos to Miss Tucker here at Glen Hills, and Mallory Umar and Ide over at Parkway. They are creating those plans right now.
I apologize. I lost connection.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
I have like two more questions, but I want other people to ask their questions if you.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the handbook talks about screening, and it talks about staff will, basically everybody will self-assess and self-screening. So does that mean that there'll be some training or signage, and we just assume that staff and or students meet the criteria for coming in, or are we talking about signing or filling out a form or using an app or anything to that extent?
That's another great question, and becomes a legality question that that as a state we've been working on. It is perfectly reasonable to ask staff members and parents to self-screen. However, if I self-screen and I choose not to be honest, how do you know? So we can't mandate anything like that, is what I'm hearing from the state lawyers, but we can ask everybody and as a community kind of help everybody say, no, this is what we do here and this is the expectation. And then if you are feeling well, then you stay home. And that's for staff and for any vulnerable student who's coming in.
So I assume there'll be like some training or guidance or a
Yes.
form to help you. Okay, education. And then the sick child policy sort of related to symptoms, like some of the symptoms that are COVID symptoms, right, are like a runny nose and a headache. And I know maybe this is good, but if we're gonna have kids in the building, I guess I was just curious what the nurse or how we're looking at that in terms of, if a child presents with a runny nose or a headache, are they really going to be sent home? Because that's sort of what it says in the sick child policy.
Unfortunately, the recommendation we're getting from the health department is assume that it's COVID and be very conscious of it. And so that's why both buildings are also having quarantine rooms and
Okay.
a health room. So if you're in the building and you slip and fall and you scrape your knee as a first grader, which happens all the time, you go to the health room, you get a Band-Aid on it. And this is, again, we're up to kind of stage 4 and above there.
Well, there'll be kids but you're talking about kids in the daycare and stage.
Correct. And if they show COVID symptoms, that we would treat it as COVID, even though some parents will probably be unhappy with us. And I get that, because we're going to be telling them that come get your child. And they're like, no, he's got allergies. And maybe they do, but we have to assume that it's COVID. And then the protocol is 24 hours with no symptoms.
Are we going to be doing temperature screenings?
The state and the health department's not recommending that anymore, mainly because many kids run fevers just naturally. So it is part of the self-screening for adults that we should take our temperature on a daily basis, and we do have thermometers to use in the buildings.
We ran up the hill. I talked to Stu for like a minute. We walked out because we were on the far field. We drove home.
Oh, Dan, yeah, we said.
Somebody needs to mute
Sorry.
Kelly's camera.
Wait, I want to hear what they were going to say about me. Stop asking questions. Sorry, I have still one more. I think.
Go ahead.
Okay, so, okay, this is, I don't know, this is like a bigger picture. I want to know how you're thinking about this in terms of, if all the teachers start off virtually, I'm wondering if teachers will at any point be responsible for teaching virtually as well as in person. So as we move, maybe again, this is far off down the line. So if it's not something, I just am curious how we're thinking about this in terms of staffing, whether there will be teachers who remain virtual, how that will, if a kid gets quarantined when they're, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself thinking about stage 4, but this is sort of the question I had about how staff will be allocated to virtual or in person when we hit that blended phase, if that's
I think I chatted about that last time. I think districts who are trying to do a blended approach where you're in 2 days and virtual 3 days and their teacher has a camera on them or something is almost impossible to ask staff to do. So I foresee that we will have specific staff. And right now we sent out a survey of parents, and we know that we have 114 students who have said that they will stay home through at least winter break. Unfortunately, it doesn't be, exactly 25 in first grade and 20, so it's spread out. So I anticipate that we will need to have virtual teachers probably by grade level. Which means that second and third grade might be a cohort together with one teacher, K4, K5, because the numbers are really spread out through every grade level, that some parents would rather stay virtual the entire time through winter break. So, and then we would ask staff to do that specifically. That would be their job. They would not have a class in the building at the same time.
But we're not starting off with kids in a kid may start in a class, but then if they wish to remain virtual, they might be switching.
Yep.
Okay, that's okay.
Finish that question. If kid starts out in a class, then what?
So everybody has their own homeroom class right now. That's how we're scheduling it. And I think what I heard from Danielle's question was, let's say it's November 1st and tongue in cheek, it's miraculously has disappeared. And we can bring kids in full time. We know that there are still some families who said they want to stay virtual. So at that time, we would create virtual classrooms. And so you may end up with a different teacher at that time. Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you.
So Danielle, while you're thinking of some other questions, I have a couple of ones. First off, and maybe I didn't see it. I see that there's a process chart for people who test positive, a flow chart. Do we have a plan for what happens if there's an outbreak in the school itself? I don't know if multiple people test positive, be it teachers or students, what we're going to do. And then also, do we address in here second waves, you know, if there's another coronavirus wave and what we're going to do, and if we, you know, take a step back to an earlier phase?
It's not specifically addressed, but I think it's set up so that we can choose to say, you know what, and again, this is the virtual learning phase 1, which is what I would say, that's what happened to us where all of a sudden we shut down the school. And so I don't think that would, you know, that might be me saying, hey, we got 8 cases here somehow. I need to shut this building down. And I call a special board meeting, we shut the building down. I could see that type of response, not the other way around that we're going to open buildings up in a day. But if there's an outbreak, obviously we'd have to react very quickly.
And is there?
And phase 1 is nobody's in the buildings.
Right. Well, that's phase 1. So we could end up going back all the way to phase 1. What happens if teachers end up getting sick? I mean, I'm thinking about substitutes specifically. You know, I know we've kind of talked about this. Well, substitute teachers, you know, there's a risk because they're older, retired people. I guess the question is, I mean, do we have any reserve people? How do we cover someone who's sick?
So what I've asked both building principals to do, in the past, we've had a building sub by building. I asked them to hire 2 building subs this year so that they are full-time substitute teachers. They get paid every day for being here, even if they don't have to be used. That's the kind of carrot that we give to them, that they're going to be paid a full week's work, even if they're not needed. But that also gives us 4 full-time substitute teachers to use anywhere in the district. We have it 2 per building, but obviously if Parkway needs 3 or Glen Hills need 3, we could move them back and forth. So that's the plan for now, because finding substitute teachers is difficult. It's difficult in a non-pandemic, and it's going to be difficult this year too.
And I do have some questions about teaching, but you know, and maybe.
Can I say something, Andy?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. We get to this point where we're kind of nitpicking this handbook, and the handbook is just like any other handbook, just like Larry said, that we can change that at every week if we have a meeting through this whole process every week. But I agree with Larry, and Larry, you should write this down in your calendar, that some of this can't be done until we approve the book. And I understand that some of this needs to be more specific, but I don't remember who said, I think it was Teresa who said, in a regular school year, if we didn't have a pandemic, we wouldn't know what our children were doing every single day. We'd know there was a block of this, a block of this, a block of this. So until they get into the school, until we finalize the handbook at least, because here's the thing, if we don't want to do it, let's do it in phases. Phase 1, we know we're doing. You know, phase 2, we know we're doing. So let's approve phase 1 and 2 at least.
Great. So I'm going to go on and ask my question
about
about phase 1 because it relates to the learning that's going to take place. So I appreciate.
So what as I was finishing my thought process is that we can ask these questions, and I get that we can ask these questions, but I think we're putting so much detail in it that they don't really know yet because it hasn't worked out yet. And the fact is, this is a skeleton, and as it gets closer and closer, they'll start putting you know, the parts in the middle and the skin and all that into the point that we'll have a living, breathing thing. But right now we're asking for things that we have no clue because we haven't voted on it. That's
Right.
now.
I agree with that to an extent, but there are big things in here that if we approved it as it is right now, that I need to know more about.
But
I
Danielle,
agree.
this is what I'm talking
Okay,
about. Even if we
Well,
approved it right
How many
now,
kids are going to be in the class and how many kids in the class in phase 2 and phase 3? That's confusing in this handbook. And if we approve this,
but 2 and
technically as
3,
it is, you could be approving 15 kids in a class.
but
You
2
know
and
what?
3 won't be happening until at least the end of the month, September.
Phase
You know what? We have
September
class
14th.
starting on September 8th. We have people coming into the building on September 1st. I have a question here about how this phase is going to work, synchronous learning. And I'm trying to do my job as a parent first and as a board member to make sure that people understand what's in this document that they may not have read and what they may not have heard. Right now, it says, for example, move students into breakout rooms, 10 minutes, students work collaboratively. There's a line in here, and I was hoping Jenica could address. Instead of being 25 minutes of learning, 25 minutes of work time, lessons should be in 5 to 10 minute chunks of time using breakout rooms for active learning times. I don't understand how breakout room is supposed to work. I think that's a relevant question.
Breakout rooms will be told when you register, when each
Yeah.
teacher has their kids. What's that thing called, the Ready, Set, Go?
Yep.
That's what I understand, it. It'll be explained at Ready, Set, Go.
So people are going to be told that, and we're being asked to prove this without knowing what it is because it's going to be explained later. I'm just asking what that looks like. What does
So-
it look like to have 5 to 10 minutes of instruction followed by breakout rooms?
In a
That's my
regular
question.
in a regular classroom, at any given time, if I'm a third grade teacher, I don't sit up and teach in front of kids like it's a college psychology class. I teach my main lesson, which is usually 5 to 10 minutes long, and then kids break out. And that's exactly what Zoom allows you to do. It's exactly what Google Classroom allows you to do. So that these 5 students go to this room to discuss what we just said. These 5 kids go to this breakout room. That's what a breakout room is. It's running like a regular classroom. That's what a breakout room means.
And I don't, those details to me, I agree.
There you go. You were on mute for a minute, Danielle.
Wait a second.
Danielle, you're frozen. Hold on.
So start back with those details to me, because that's where you got frozen.
There we go.
There you go. You're back.
Okay. I agree, Tamika. I'm not looking, and I hope it's not coming across that way, to really go into the details of how teachers are going to schedule things, because I do understand that that's a learning on the go kind of thing, I think, as well. And that we do have the basic framework for that. And I'm satisfied with that. What I want us to be on the same page with is the phases as they are laid out, what they involve, whether staff is in the building or not, or required, whether scheduled access to in-person services is going to happen in phase 2 or 3, and whether phase 3 is virtual learning or blended, because what has been laid out in the handbook is dependent upon whether we are in a blended phase or a virtual learning phase. So I cannot approve a general plan where I don't understand that, what it means to approve that. So that is what I'm personally looking for, and I think that would give administration and our principals and staff and teachers enough to go with, and there would be trust there, about those other details. But for me, I'm not okay with phase 2 as it's stated, or phase 3 necessarily, because of the way it's labeled and what seems to go with that. So those are sort of my concerns. And we haven't even talked about staff being required or not, and that is very clearly outlined in the phases.
And my answer earlier to you, Danielle, which is this is a living, breathing document, and that we would make those changes and bring it back at the next board meeting. I can't change it right now during this meeting, because this was presented as the book. So you can choose as a board, and I would, if you want to, say we're not going to approve the handbook till August 26th until these changes are made, and that's
Well,
fine.
here's the question though, process wise. If there are, just say it's language and there are certain things that could be added. Oh, I'm sorry. Another thing is the gating criteria. It's extremely vague as it's listed in the handbook. And what I've heard you say is it's not that vague. It's actually going to need to be approved by the board. It would be based on at least 2 weeks of data. And I think that's important information to be listed out clearly for people to read in this handbook. And those are tight, you know, things, adding specific language. Could we not, can you not e-vote, or can you not sort of amend the guide and send it out for like an e-vote? I don't know the logistics of that, but do you have to wait 2 weeks till our next board meeting? Could we call a special board meeting in a couple days or so? I'm just trying to think creatively. And I don't know if anybody else shares concerns about the handbook the way I do. So those are my concerns. And I also don't want to delay the process over things that I think are easily remedied.
But that's what I'm saying. I guess, and Larry, correct me if I'm wrong. The things that Danielle is mentioning, those are correctable. Even when if we approve it, you can correct the things that she's, or give example, you know, like you said, she explained that it wasn't specific enough on, what were you just,
The gating criteria.
the gating criteria, yes. So even if we approve it, you can expand on that with
Well, I
our
mean,
approval,
So,
correct?
yes, and unfortunately, I agree with you, Danielle, that the grading criteria is less than ideal. The reason that we pushed the meeting back to today from last Wednesday is because I told you the Department of Health Services was supposed to be coming out with all this wonderful data, and they still haven't released it yet. So unfortunately, you know, this is the best I got from our North Shore Health Department, but I think at the very beginning it says is actively working with schools in our jurisdiction to assist them with the reopening plan. Related information is available here, and it can change over time. So that it's going to change, but you know, I think I don't know. I would leave it up to the board.
I just want to say one
meet
thing. We're
sometime.
focusing on a handbook. We're not focusing on the substance of reopening. We definitely need to understand everything that Danielle's talking about. We definitely need to know what these criteria are. We need to understand the differences in realign the phases.
I disagree, Andy. I think to the extent the handbook follows CDC guidelines, to the extent the handbook follows North Shore Health Department guidelines, to the extent we're always receiving that data, receiving that information, at any point, the handbook can change. Tomorrow we could have a vaccine and none of this is going to be at all relevant. I think we need to recognize that, you know, there's no 100% right answer to just about everything we're concerned with in this pandemic. There's no way we can write a sentence or a phrase that will cover everything we need to be concerned with. Unfortunately, that's the circumstance we're in. To the extent we approve a handbook, I feel like it needs to be a little bit vague. It needs to cover generalities. It needs to be broad, because that will be incumbent on the administration, incumbent upon the principals, incumbent upon the staff to make changes accordingly and or bring changes to the board to the extent the handbook needs to be changed. I mean, we have an employee handbook that we've had for, I don't know, 6 to 10 years. And we've made changes to that as we go. There's nothing in there that, you know, lists what a teacher has to do every day, or nothing in there that lists when a teacher has to stay home. I feel like, you know, we're trying to solve every little problem that might come up, and there's just no way to do that.
You know, Teresa, I understand what you're saying, and actually I agree with you completely, that there's no way to do all that. I mean, I think that from where I'm sitting here, for me, the important thing is about what are we, I mean, and I'll say it again, what do we need to do to open on day one? That's what I think people need to understand, and that's why I keep looking at those questions. As to the issues that are being raised in terms of, you know, the differences here, first of all, this isn't the Constitution. This is not a living, breathing document. Yes, it can adapt and it can grow, okay? But I don't think that ultimately we need a handbook right now. We need to know what it is that we're doing on day one, and then we need to have a plan for getting to the next day. Because, you know, we can do all this stuff with having these various phases outlined and frankly, we should have some consistency in the document, but we shouldn't be adopting something for the sake of adopting it, and we shouldn't be adopting something that's not, that we feel is imperfect from the get-go, to say we'll fix it later.
You're in
That's
an imperfect
I'm about
situation
ready
though,
to
Andy.
call-
There's no way
Actually-
to get away from that.
And I'm ready to almost call a vote on this.
Well,
Same
there's no
here.
motion, so, and.
I make a motion that we approve the handbook, the reopening handbook.
There's
Second.
actually, well, there is also a couple hands out here, so we have to
So
go.
you
through
still
that.
have to address it and now say discussion.
The motion was out of order because we.
No, it's not out of order.
We can have discussion, but our board policies say that we listen to people before we take a vote.
And the motion is
There were
up.
hands that were
It's
up.
not we didn't ask for the vote yet. I made a motion, she seconded.
So-
Now
Wait,
you
wait,
can
wait,
go
let me
into
go back.
discussion.
How did we get into discussion if we didn't bring a motion to begin with?
I brought a motion,
No, you just did that a moment ago, right?
right, just now.
My guess
Uh,
is I don't remember because it was an hour ago. We may have been out of order.
I just made the
Um,
motion 30
so, yeah.
seconds ago.
So I think, Andy, what's appropriate now is it is time for discussion. You can open the discussion up to board members or community members.
All right, so, board members, does anyone want to make any additional comment before we go to the community?
I think,
Okay. All right,
I said my piece. I think the handbook needs to
I
remain
will
somewhat
just-
vague. Specificity is not a goal.
I wanted to say one thing that's come up for me, that I think the handbook is not necessarily meant to direct the administration and teachers and staff. It is also it is our communication to the communities. If you go to other districts and you look, they have their reopening handbooks, their guidebooks online for families in that community to understand what is going on. And so I think that it at the very least needs to be accurate and consistent to the best of our ability as we know it when we approve it. Because it's less of a guide, a roadmap for Larry, who, like we said, can suggest changes, can make those changes, the board can as well. But we have to think about this as the first look the community also is going to get at what our approach is going to be. So if it does not accurately reflect Larry's vision, I don't see how we can approve it. It is not just general or specific. It is not correct in what he has just said. And it does, and the places where it should offer detail are not in the scheduling or the minutia of the day-to-day sanitizing and all of that. I think the specificity needs to be in how people are approaching the phases and the gating criteria, because that is what is important for the community to understand in determining how they're going to teach their kids and how they're going to maneuver this whole pandemic. So that's what I'm thinking.
Andy, this is Shannon. I'm just wondering if you would allow me to address Danielle's questions regarding the differences between stage 2 and stage 3.
of course.
Okay, stage 2, just to be clear on everything, stage 2 is intended to get every kid acquainted with their classroom teacher in a virtual setting. So we want every student, because every student, even those in special education, are regular education students first, and they have the opportunity and should have the opportunity to meet their classroom teachers with their non-disabled peers. So that's
So
the
Shannon,
goal.
Sorry, why can't we do that? And also, why can't we simultaneously schedule in-person access for other services that they wouldn't be getting from that main teacher?
Yep, you can absolutely do that. So that's the difference. Well, with phase 3, though, I'm sorry to cut you off. With
No,
phase
that's
3,
not clear in the handbook. That's
I
the
agree.
problem.
So phase 3, I think, I liked what you said about virtual learning plus, because when you say blended learning in phase 3 and you say blended learning in phase 4, it gets confusing. So I understand what you're saying by that, and that could be clarified very easily, because the goal of stage 3 is to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the special education students that have therapies and IEP minutes that need to be met. And many people on this call today are parents that have filled out a survey that close to 100 of these families want kids in the building to get that direct instruction and those services for therapies. So I think that could be a very easy fix to clarify the title on that chart that you're looking at for blended or virtual plus.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I will just open this up to visitor visitor comments here. Karen, I don't know if you're listening here, but I don't know what order the hands went up, so you can unmute people as you see fit.
Ala Franklin is first. I'm gonna unmute her now. Ala Franklin, 7365 North Bethmar Lane. Question, I guess, kind of loaded question. So we are less than 2 weeks away from the first day of school. And I do have a privilege of having a school board member as my husband, right, on the board. So I have a little bit of information, but I still don't know what's going to happen. So we talked a little bit today about there will be one-on-one meetings with teachers, but I don't know when it's going to be, when the Chromebooks will be delivered, when the material will be provided. I have a kid who is telling me, so what's happening? If you remember last year, at that time we already had registration, we knew who the teachers are going to be. None of that is explained right now. Or moreover, there are parents who are not participating in those virtual discussions that we have right now, and they don't check their emails very often. They just get their snail mail, and that's where they get information. So none of that information being communicated to parents. And I'm concerned that there's just a lack of communication in general and what goes out to our parents. I honestly don't know what's going to happen as the next week. And I'm lucky that I can compare to what my son is doing in high school and what we're doing in middle school. They go through orientation. They go through training on how they need to operate their Chromebooks, what the school year is going to look like, how they need to log in the first day. Am I going to be there with my daughter, every day, making sure she's fine because she didn't have the training or she doesn't know what it's going to be? That's one question. And second question, you guys talk a little bit, and it's obviously some extent handbook or whatever. But when we move from virtual to, semi-virtual, partially, what are the criteria? What is that going to be like? I mean, I'm worried until I know what's going to happen as far as the school goes. How many kids going to be in class? How are they going to teach? How this whole transition is going to work? And I know that it's not going to be defined right now, but that's the information that parents need to know. That's all.
Thank you. Shannon or Larry, I don't know if
I guess the answer that, what I'm trying to get out and that we've sent in the last parent newsletter is my recommendation to the board would be that we have ready, set, go meetings September 1 through September 4. At that meeting, you would get all the materials you need to start 100% virtual education on September 8th. And then starting on or around September 14th, the most vulnerable students that we have in the Glendale-River Hills School District could start coming into the buildings. And before we would ever get into a full classroom set, that the board would approve that. The gating criteria that I spoke about tonight would be that we need to have less than 100 to 100,000, which is a fancy medical calculation that the North Shore Health Department, just for specifics, over the last 2 weeks, we were at 163. So we're nowhere near the criteria to bring kids into the building as a full classroom yet. I have been waiting for the Department of Health Services, who have said that they're going to update their information that started 2 weeks ago. I, along with the other 425 superintendents in the state, are extremely frustrated because we don't have that information that I can share with you. So I apologize about that. But for what I think parents want to know is someday, once between September 1 and September 4, they will have a face-to-face, if they choose to, or a virtual meeting with their son or daughter's teacher. And that would be full virtual. And at that meeting, you'd get everything you need to start full virtual learning.
All right. Any follow-up?
Can I just add one more thing, Andy? I'm sorry, this is Shannon again.
Happy to hear you.
Thanks. I just want to add one more thing is that I believe 100% we're responsible for every kid, every day, whatever it takes. But right now, I need to advocate again on behalf of those students in special education. And the board not making a decision regarding the reopening plan and allowing the students to move into phase 3 is putting all of my families that are reaching out to me regarding their services on hold. So I would only ask that the board consider the fact that those students need services and those students need their IEPs met, and many of those students cannot do that virtually.
I just want, my question is, as I look at the handbook and scheduling in-person access to staff, it's vague about, it says, offer small group instruction for individual education, therapy, and counseling services. You know, we are working on, at Nicolay, specific criteria in the special ed department about who is actually coming in. And I'm just wondering, like, what specifically and how that criteria is going to be set, because here it's not very clear. Like, will we start with students who should get related services that need to be provided in person, for example, PT or OT? You know, that's what I'm wondering, when that will be established. So it's very clear as to who is going to get first dibs at in-person instruction in small group setting.
I don't know if that question is for me, but I honestly, you know, I love you, Molly, and I love Nicolay, but I always remind Ann at Nicolay that you talk about students in grades 9 through 12, and we are talking about students that are 3 through, you know, 13 or 12, and that the needs of an early childhood student and what they can access virtually at home, I would ask that every single early childhood student probably needs in-person services. Our first and second grade students, I would argue in special education, need in-person services. So I guess the district, what we did is we surveyed every single special ed parent, and we want to meet the needs of each and every kid on an individual basis. That's why they have an IEP, which is individualized. And if that family wants in-person services, we want to make that happen. And if the family wants virtual services, we are going to do the best we can to provide virtual services to families that do have medically fragile children in their homes or via virtual learning.
And I didn't mean to compare Glen Hills to Nicolay. I was just using it as an example that I think it's important that at least there's some sort of criteria that's spelled out to families so that we really know that this is how students are getting into the building. That's my concern.
I know. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving on to the next one, we have Lisa Rondeau.
Thank you. I just want to kind of piggyback on what Shannon and others have talked about since the beginning of this meeting. And I feel like while this meeting has dragged on and we've certainly identified lots of potential issues down the road, what we need to focus on now is less than 2 or 3 weeks from now when school is opening, and how are we meeting the needs of the kids that require in-person services, and particularly I'm talking about students that have IEPs. For me, I think what it comes down to as a parent and as a community member and as an educator is that our actions are what we say to people are our values. And when I look at Nicolay High School, for example, who is following a similar plan, opening virtually because that's what's safest right now for COVID, and on the other hand, is allowing in-person sports practices starting on August 17th and full contact sports practices starting September 7th for things like football and soccer, which would be higher risk. If this board is telling me that my children who have an IEP that clearly lays out what they need to be successful, but that cannot start until September 14th, what you are saying is their needs come after cross-country practice. Their needs come after football practice. And that is something that I'm having a hard time squaring right now, because I don't think that's the case. That my daughters who are learning how to recite their address, that their needs do not start on September 14th, a full week after we've had sports practices at our area districts. Their needs start and continue throughout the school year. And
Can you explain, I'm sorry,
This is
can you
a-
explain
yeah.
what you're talking about again, please? I'm confused a little bit, and I want to make sure I completely understand you. What are you talking about between the sports and,
I'm saying there's a disconnect between what we're saying is acceptable, right? We're saying we need to start virtually because that's what's safest, but yet sports practices are starting before then, right?
So you're talking about two different districts right now. I mean,
Right, so somehow we've mitigated those risks and we've mitigated them in the communities, right? If you go out in the community, you see these things happening. So my question to the board is, I need a clear explanation as to why my children who have a clear document that says what their needs are, that could not start before September 14th, which was the first time I've heard that date today from Larry saying that's when we would move to this phase 3. And so while I appreciate this conversation has gone on long and it's kind of, gotten into the nuts and bolts of it, I think we have to get this hammered out here. I'm not comfortable saying we're going to approve this handbook and kind of work out these details later, because come September 14th, we could be in a real different situation. And so we need to be setting it up so that we are clearly putting forth our efforts into those kids that need those in-person services. That's where that focus needs to be, and that's where this clarity that I think we were trying to kind of talk about at the beginning of the meeting, who is going to be in the building and when, and starting at what date and what size of groups, that those are issues that need to be resolved, because we are talking about something that's happening in just a few short weeks. So for me, my point is, I'm not clear sitting here in Glendale trying to figure out why my kids would not be able to get in-person services for speech and PT until September 14th, when literally a mile up the road, people can have soccer practice or football practice. That if we can find a way to do that safely, then we can find a way to have small groups of kids in the building to get their legally required services. And that's what I want to see kind of figured out and addressed, because we know there's a risk in everything, but we need to figure out how we're going to meet those needs.
well, I don't know who's going to answer that, but first and foremost, as our district, I believe we are not doing any sports. So in the sense of what other school districts or even city or whatever, that is on them and what the parents choose or choose not to allow their children to do. But Larry or Shannon or Janica, whoever, I hear her concern, and I thought and please get me, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought in those sessions between the 1st and the 4th, that's when the specific IEPs and the programs that each child needs is going to be addressed. Am I wrong, or did I hear that incorrectly?
No, I think you heard it correctly. I also think that Danielle's point earlier was to make sure that we change the semantics of phase 2 to make sure that we can have kids in the building as soon as September 8th, which we would do.
Okay.
And actually, we, quite honestly, it should start on September 1st. So we will have special education teachers working full-time September 1st, working towards IEP goals with families. So, I think people are making the assumption that we're just sitting on our butts until September 14th, and that just isn't true.
Did she have a follow-up question?
I guess I would also just advocate for the fact that September 1st to the 4th would be when each of the families that we're speaking of could come in, meet the classroom teacher, because it's very important for special education students to also meet their regular ed classroom teacher. So that they would meet the regular ed classroom teacher, get the materials and the devices for the same things that their typical peers are getting. That is very valuable. And at that same time, for those people that are speaking about their specific children, the special ed teachers and the staff that give related services would show up to those Ready, Set, Go meetings, and then you would start coordinating your schedules and plans, because each person that's requested services has requested something a little different, and we want to individualize that. So that first week in September allows us the opportunity to make sure we are staggering the scheduling support so that we don't have 200 people coming in for special ed services from 9 to 10 and can't social distance. So there's a lot of pieces and parts that come into play to make this work safely for everybody.
And I think this just goes to my point, though, that if we approve this handbook as it is, and this is our public facing statement, the handbook as it is would tell a family with students in special education that their needs are not going to be addressed or met until phase 3. So that's why I'm kind of focusing on.
I don't read it that way, Danielle, but that's fine. And so my recommendation is don't approve it, and I'll bring it back next week, or we can have a special board meeting. I think we're talking in circles over semantics. We made it very clear. I've tried to be very clear that our job is to meet every child's need starting on September 1. And that is our job, and we will do that to the best of our ability. And semantics be damned. And I'm sorry, for my inappropriate language, but this is getting ridiculous.
Well, and Danielle, just to your point, I will, as I'm speaking here, because I'm not at work, I'm at home, I will begin working on the semantics of change of the language, because I understand what you're saying, and it can be clear to say virtual plus for stage 3, and that stage 2 could have in-person people, because September 1st through the 4th, there's people in the building. So I understand the semantics, and I agree that
semantics matter if this is what we're communicating to the public, and it's why people were concerned the first time this was communicated or publicized, the phases, and why we're, sort of still needing to address this. So I'm glad that it seems like that this is not the case, but that's why I think it's very important that this be.
Right, and I think that's the perfect reason of giving feedback. You're providing feedback on very specific things that are very easy to edit and change, that really doesn't change the overall handbook document, because it's time to get this moving.
I would agree, Shannon. I would like to call the question and amend.
We have visitors here we have visitors that did not speak their piece yet. And I actually
call the question goes before everything else, Andy.
I would like to call the question and include Danielle's amendments to the handbook to include in-person learning beginning in phase 2 as the administration sees fit. And amend Tamika's motion accordingly to approve the handbook with those amendments as suggested by Danielle.
I'll accept a friendly amendment.
Okay. So at this point then, on a call to question, you're asking them for a vote now. So it goes to roll vote?
Sorry, can someone explain what's happening to me?
Call the question. She has stopped. When you call the question, she has stopped all discussion, and it goes to the vote.
Of the original motion as amended.
No, she just amended the motion, which is adding she amended the motion, adding your suggestions in. I did a friendly approval, I guess, of it. So we didn't have to have a second, and then she's the one that seconded the amendment in the first place. So now we're at the point where she has called a question. Now we have to vote.
We're voting on whether to amend your original motion?
No, we're voting. We've already amended because I accepted the friendly amendment.
Okay.
So now we're voting to pass the handbook with the amendments.
The call to question was out of order because we were still doing visitor participation.
It's not, call to question is never out of order.
The person has to have the floor. And I was speaking at the time, and I was asking Shannon a question. So I don't want to cut off the discussion that 5 people have left that want to ask questions. Now, if you want to take a vote on that and override what I said, go, be it. I can call a vote. If you want to close off the discussion, which is what it is, I think that that has to be the next question. So if you want to close off the discussion of the people who are asking, who've been waiting here while we've been dickering about for an hour, fine. Then I'll
Well, finish what you have to say then.
No, and I just want to go on to Sheila Paquette, but I did have a clarifying question for Shannon, which was
Okay.
Shannon previously said that if we don't act on phase 3, that we're not going to, it made it sound like if we don't approve phase 3 tonight, then there's no special education services. Is that what you said?
What I'm saying is right now, the school board voted to go all virtual for all students. The reopening handbook allows us to work phased in approach, which allows small groups of kids to come in the phased in approach. Right now, I guess I don't feel like I have the ability to offer in-person services because the board voted that all students get virtual learning on July 28th or whatever date that was. So to get us approval to bring students and staff into the building, we need the board to approve us to allow small groups of students into the building because the vote was that it was all virtual.
When we voted to make it all virtual, my recollection was that when we voted to make it all virtual, we had it with the asterisk of determining special needs services. So I always thought that that was encompassed as part of what we were discussing. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but thank you for clarifying what your position
Right.
is.
And if it isn't, then great, I'll just move forward.
Okay, I think that, hearing the point of what the board's saying, I'd like to wrap up the visitor participation, but I would like to give people who've been waiting a chance. So if we can keep comment to a minute, I'd like to call on the people who have their
Andy?
hands up. Yeah?
With all due respect, Andy, visitor participation is not in the agenda on this question.
Visitor participation is in the agenda, but more importantly, our board policies say that visitors who want to ask questions are allowed to do that. And that was the process that we set forth in the beginning of this meeting and at the last meeting. So I don't want to cut people out. If you want to cut 5 people out, then, we can take a vote.
I'll make a motion to cut 5 people out.
Well, that was your motion. So I guess if you want to go back to your motion on the called question, I'll do a roll call vote. The motion before us is a called question to close debate, to close discussion.
Wait, Andy, call the question had to have a second. I seconded it. So that is where we are.
Then fine.
And then there's a vote that has to happen to end discussion. So if you have to vote to end the discussion, if the discussion is about to end, but it's a vote. So if you vote and the motion doesn't pass, then you keep discussion. You keep the discussion going. This is what that is the vote right there.
The vote is only to end discussion.
Yes,
Okay.
that is the call to question.
Fine. Then I will do a roll call vote. Danielle Bailey.
No.
Aye or nay? No.
Sorry, no, I do not want to end discussion.
Good. Teresa Seam.
Yes, I would like to end discussion.
Tamika.
Yes.
Molly.
No.
And Andy votes no. The motion fails. Discussion will continue. Sheila Paquette is next in line. And please, because it is going long, I'm going to ask that we try to keep our comment to a minute if possible. We haven't had too much participation yet this night, but in consideration of the board's comments, I'd ask that we try to keep our comments to a minute. Thank you very much. And if you can unmute Sheila Paquette.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. I'm just so confused at what all just went about. But no one's saying that anyone's like sitting on their butts and not doing this. But I have a concern that any of these special ed meetings that are supposed to be happening are starting already, like not until the 1st. That is just so long. You already know what children are receiving, special services. I have no idea that if there is even a special ed team for the 7th grade, and I'm not waiting until the 14th to start my daughter's services. I don't understand what the holdup is and why we're not even having IEP meetings or anything, these discussions until the 1st. That is so long, and these children, my daughter needs some sort of routine. She's medically fragile. She cannot come into that school. And I guess my question is who's even teaching my child? Does anyone know? I don't know.
Yeah, I do know, and it's going to be approved by the board at the next school board meeting because,
So that's a couple days before we're supposed to be having IEP meetings and discussing our child's needs.
yep, and there are 2 experienced teachers who
Oh.
are coming in.
Oh, okay.
And school starts on September 1st.
Right. And this person, so you're going to let us know who's teaching our child on the 26th.
I can't go into it because the board hasn't approved their contracts yet, so yes. And because of the timing, I wasn't able to get it on this agenda.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's all I got. Thanks.
Andy, you're muted.
I think Eric and Tracy Stetler are next. Why don't you unmute them,
Yes.
Karen, and proceed accordingly?
That is correct. Thanks.
Okay, so can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. I am hoping that we might make this just a little bit easier, and maybe the board might consider approving in the original vote on the 28th to go full virtual. We had the caveat that in-person needs, especially when considering special education and very specific one-to-one needs, would be addressed. And I'm hoping that the board might consider approving a caveat to phase 2, an add to phase 2 that starts this in-person when necessary and when required by IEPs and 504s can be added to phase 2 in order to start that right away, so that these questions are not left in the balance for another whatever it is, 10 days. I'm thinking that that's the quickest way to be able to approve this handbook. Because I feel like Danielle Bailey and Mr. Franklin's questions are very on point. It can't be vague. We have so many questions and not enough answers, and that's really important to us. I'm also very on point, and my focus right now is to build a team with my teacher and my student. I am the at-home help for that student, for my children. I need to build a rapport with my teacher, my children's teachers, and I have 8th grade teachers and 3rd grade teachers and 1st grade teachers. I need to be able to build a rapport and to try to gain some knowledge from those teachers on how best to help them. And so I feel like a decision tonight is very important, although I don't think that the board should be voting on a handbook that is too vague. I feel like that we can add, just like we did on July 28th, caveats to this book right here, right now, that make a difference for every family that has questions. Like Danielle said, this is the public front of our school system, and it's really important for us as a district to be able to publicize something that gives answers to every single family, whether they receive it by mail, by email, by social media, or any other way, what our plan is. I mean, that's my only point. I feel like we can make an amendment to what phase 2 equals or what phase 3 equals to include our IEP and 504 families and any other families who have immediate need as of September 1 without having to not approve the handbook. It's worth going through it. It's worth making it specific. It's worth your time. And you're doing such an awesome job. And I just appreciate every single one of your just championship in this arena. That's all, guys.
Thank you. I want to point out that our minutes from the board meeting on July 28th, when we approved virtual education, state that we were going to decide the next stage on August 5th for addressing those special needs. And to me, I think that that is the more important thing to get out of the way. One of the more important things, I should say. I hear what you're saying. All right. Our next person is, I hope it's Amber Parham, AF Parham.
That's me.
Hi.
So anyways, I appreciate all the work you guys are doing. What I don't appreciate is the tone of this meeting and the foul language that was used. I just wish that everybody would have a little bit more respect for each other moving forward. Check your tone, check your language. It's disrespectful to everybody who has been a part of this meeting. That's all I have to say. And who was the last speaker, Tracy? I completely agree with her.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Okay, our next person is Steve G.
Still there?
Steve G, if you're not there, we'll come back to you. Jim Beckman is the other person on the line.
Can you hear me?
Oh, Steve, hi. Yes.
Hi. All right, perfect. Tamika and Larry, you had a conversation earlier that my wife and I just had a couple questions on. So the question came up with school funding, and I know the conversation is going to come up later, but I wasn't sure if there was going to be discussion. And, we want to do what's best for our family, but we don't want to put the district at a disadvantage. So with a son that would be in a half-day K-4 program and us both working, it's just, we don't have time to go through half-day K-4 with 2 hours of programming with him. So, maybe we'll go through that on demand, maybe not, but we're going to have him in daycare all day, but we don't want to put the district at a disadvantage financially. So I think that that's a conversation, knowing that we're talking to other parents in a similar position. We need to hear more about what that looks like. And if we unenroll now, what then choices do we have come winter to re-enroll? So I just think that that's something we need to know more about, and other parents on this call will need to know more about.
Larry, do you want to?
Yep, I can jump on that. So K4 is a different circumstance than K5 and through 8th grade. K4 is optional for parents. It's not a state mandate. Our state mandates, starting as 5-year-old kindergarten, you have to go to school. So if you choose to not enroll or unenroll right now, you can re-enroll at any time throughout the school year, as long as you are a resident of the Glendale-River Hill School District. Does that answer your question, Steve?
But finish the rest, I think. What happens from K5 and up?
If you can't, well, actually you can. If you are a K5 through 8th grade student and you choose to unenroll, you have to tell the state of Wisconsin that you are going to homeschool your child or enroll them in another district through open enrollment.
Now the problem, and I want you to be specific with what the ramifications of our school district is on September, the 3rd week in September, and for the 3 years.
Well,
because I think they kind of need to know that.
I don't want to get into into a school funding 101, but I think we've had this discussion multiple times at the board. School funding, how much money, the revenue limit for the Glendale-River Hill School District is determined by the state, and it's a 3-year rolling average of how many kids show up on the 3rd Friday of Friday. Now the change this year, because of all the pandemic, is we will be able to count anybody who's virtual and or in the building as our student. But if families choose to unenroll, obviously then we can't use their kids as students. And so, you know, for last year, I look this up every Monday because it is important to school funding. We ended the year with 1,081 kids. The year before, our third Friday count was about 1,064. Don't yell at me if I'm off by, I don't have it right in front of me. And then the year before that, it was about 1,007. We've been very flat for the last 3 years. So you average those three, the state does some magical funding formula and they say you get to spend this much money between taxes and state aid. And that's kind of how school funding works. So the more students in a district, the more money you can use to educate those students.
The other part, well, which Larry won't say, is as the count is on September, wherever your child is, that's where the money follows them. The next count is not until the third week of February.
No, second week of January.
Or second week of January, I'm sorry. And then if you decide to take your child, put it somewhere, and then come back in the middle of like May or whatever, that funding will not follow that kid. It will go to wherever that child is enrolled at that time, and therefore the district will be. And I know Larry doesn't want to get into it, but I really want people to fully understand their decisions that they're making right now, the full health of their child, as well as the school, as well as the school district. I think it has to be a whole thought process. And you have to do what's best for your own child and what your child's needs are.
Okay, moving along then, Jim Beckman.
Good evening, everybody. Jim Beckman, 2226 West Arbor Avenue, Glendale, Wisconsin, 53209. Glendale resident. I have my Glendale resident hat on right now, and I'd like to end, I don't know if I'm the last one or not here, on somewhat of a positive note from a very lively discussion that we've had tonight. And the word I want to just bring forward is trust. It's a critical word that we trust each other and that the board and the administration and the community trust one another, that we will do the right thing for every kid every day. Will we get it exactly right? No, not every time. And this document that we're talking about tonight, far be from perfect, but it really is a good document and it's a great framework. And I think when we come down to the kind of I's and T's that we're dotting and crossing and it isn't quite there or not, those are some individual things that I believe can be worked out on the side, if you will, with a phone call, an email, things like that to move this along. Because I can tell you that I'll put my school employee hat on now. People are working around the clock here to make this work right. And I think you know that, but I think the community needs to know that. And it's sometimes easy to forget some of those things. So I'd like to end with a smile and some trust. That's all I got. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. It looks like Mr. Beckman was the last person. So given that we've gone through discussion, debate, we have no open motion pending here. The motion is to accept the handbook as is. I don't know if there are any amendments.
That's not the motion. The motion is to accept the handbook with the corrections.
Comments.
Danielle.
I'm sorry, has that motion been formally adopted? There was a called question.
It was adopted, yes.
Okay.
But Shannon brought up a good point that we need to address, is that she is under the impression, or maybe other people too are under the impression, that if this handbook is not adopted, then we can't go forward with establishing criteria for students that can go into the building. So somehow I want it on record that whether this handbook is approved or not, that process still needs to go forward. It's not stalled because we didn't approve the handbook tonight.
Duly noted. And I can make sure that that happens, Molly.
Okay.
Okay. With that said, we have a motion out here to adopt the handbook with the changes as noted. So I will do a roll call vote. And I will start recording my screen from left to right. Tamika Buchner.
Wait, so I'm sorry, so there's no discussion about before the vote?
We had
Since it was amended. Okay, all right. I'm just trying to get clear on what's happening.
Yeah. Okay. So that's all right. So Molly Cuccioli, well, I'm going from left to right and recording my screen. Now, Molly, you're on the left. So Molly, are you in favor or against, yea or nay?
No.
Tamika?
Yes.
Danielle?
I'm sorry, I feel confused. The handbook, I don't want to, just so I'm clear, I don't know if this is allowed. So we are going to be able to say, to clarify the in-person access or phases, regardless of whether this specific handbook gets approved?
Yes.
We're going to, okay, so no, I don't want to approve this handbook as it is. It's still, okay, yeah.
No. Okay. Teresa Seam?
Teresa got kicked off.
Teresa got kicked off.
You
And
text.
Andrew Franklin votes no.
All right.
The motion fails.
All right, next item is just because of COVID, the federal government is telling the state government that we have to have a new policy. It's policy GBDE, and I'm recommending that the board approve the first reading policy GBDE, employee compensation for unexpected or extraordinary circumstances, which basically means that we have to have a policy on the books because we use federal dollars to make payments as salary and benefits to our special education and other employees through federal funds, and we have to have this. So I'm recommending that you read this and pass it as a first reading, and if you have more questions, to come back and we can make changes at the second reading.
Is there a motion with respect to the recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? So Larry, the policy here was necessitated from DPI this year, so everyone basically adopting the same language?
From my understanding from the superintendents I talked to is yes. The language came right from the business manager, so this really came from Rosie and the business managers.
Okay. All right. Then with no further discussion, I'll do a roll call vote. Molly?
Aye.
Danielle?
Aye.
Tamika?
Aye.
And Andy votes aye. The motion carries. Congratulations.
Teresa is there.
Couple quick information items. Registration information was sent out via email to all district residents. If for some reason you do not get the registration information, it's also being snail mailed and it will come to you, and that means that your information on our Infinite Campus isn't working. So please make sure if you have not received the registration material that you call the district office so that we can get your updated information. School funding discussion, we just had that, so I'm done with that. And Nicolay Partner Schools update, I will continue to work with our partner schools twice a week, and then I'm done, and it's visitor participation to you, Mr. Franklin.
Okay. And there's nothing else then, so visitor participation. Is there anyone else who has anything that they'd like to ask on a non-agenda item? We ask, keep in line with the restriction I put on to keep your comment to a minute. I'll give everyone a moment to gather their thoughts. We already have a couple of people. I will start with Jenny Doss.
It doesn't give me a chance to.
There you go. We hear you. Jenny, we hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent. 6605 North Braeburn Lane. My question is about the special ed teachers. I was just making sure that the teachers that are moving into the special ed positions Are they all licensed special ed teachers?
All of our teachers are licensed by the state of Wisconsin, yes.
And special ed teachers?
They have the appropriate license to teach middle school special ed and upper elementary special ed, yes.
Okay, I know that we had a lot of moving around and I was just concerned that we would have the appropriate staffing. That's my question, thank you.
We will.
Larry, just, so we can elaborate on that, what is the process for getting special ed certification in the state of Wisconsin?
You have to have a degree, or you can have an emergency license if you have a teaching degree with the understanding that you're going back to get the special ed degree.
So you need to have, if you don't have special ed, you need to go and get an emergency license?
And with the understanding that you're going to school, get the special education license from the state of Wisconsin, yes.
Okay. And how many people do we have on staff who currently have emergency licenses versus regular special ed credentials?
Last year we had one, that person finished. This year we have two.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Jeff Hauk.
Everybody, can anybody hear me?
Yeah, you speak up a little bit.
Sure. Sorry. First of all, thanks for everything that you guys have done. I do have one question. I appreciate the fact that you guys are going to one learning management system, with it being Google Classroom for most of the kids anyway. I'm wondering how you are going to go and deal with the kids. I'm thinking of my third grader who doesn't have an email, never logged into an email, yet I know that's required for Google Classroom, etc. How is that going to be taught to the kids? Because I think that is a big ask on to have your staff do that in a 15-minute ready, set, go meeting, to also teach an 8-year-old how to use an email, etc. So I'm wondering if the district has any foresight or will put any foresight into overcoming that hurdle, because I'm confident my student as a learner, and I want to remove as many hurdles for her so she can have as much success possible as a virtual student. And these particularly younger kids, they've never dealt with an email yet. So I'm just wondering your thoughts, or if you don't have any thoughts, can you maybe try to help formulate something?
Sure. Earlier, Jenica Westfall jumped on, and we are doing a parent. I'm not anticipating 4, 5, 6, even third graders to be able to do that themselves. We will need parent support to do that. So we're doing parent training and student training as we do this. I do not believe it would be appropriate to ask a 6-year-old to log on by themselves. They're going to need parent support to do that. And we'll give the training to the parents for that.
Okay, and I'm wondering, just because there are a lot of things out there that are still yet to be determined for us as parents, in order to get these things scheduled into our schedules. Again, I know you guys have a lot on your plate, but can we get some dates and times as to when some of these meetings might be taking place for parents so we can clear our schedules? Because again, this is different for every kid. It's different for you guys. It's different for me. I'm going back to school myself in a week, but I want to make this as smooth a transition as possible for the kids. And these little things, I don't want to be hurdles that all of a sudden get a kid to shut down when they're already not in front of their classroom teacher.
Jeff, I appreciate the question, and I agree with you 100%. The schedules were in the handbook that was just denied, so I'm going to mandate that my principals send out their daily schedule. That includes the Ready, Set, Go meetings, so that you can set an individual meeting up with your teacher, and it should be done before the end of this week.
When will then, and I apologize, I know I'm over a minute, do the kids already have access to an email? And if so, can that get sent out to parents? Because I know how to log into Google, and I can try to start to teach my kid now. If we can get some of this lag stuff out as soon as possible to parents. Like if it's just going to be, esmith@glendale.k12, can that stuff get sent to us as parents as well, or be put into Infinite Campus so we can get these kids, hey, this is what an email is, send me one.
Yes, we can get that to you almost immediately, and the email addresses have been created already.
Okay, and I'm just saying, I'm trying to remove as many hurdles as we can to make this go as smooth as possible.
I get that 100%, and that information will be out this week to you.
All right, I appreciate you guys' time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, the next one that we have on the list is Laura, without a last name. Okay.
I think Karen's looking her up.
Yeah.
So give us a second.
Yep.
There's still
There she
100.
goes.
Yep, there we go. Laura, you're unmuted now.
Thank you. Hi, this is Laura Andriotti, and I am speaking as the secretary at Parkway Elementary. I would like to encourage the board and the administration to not use the word registration when they're talking about verification of the information that the families are needing to do to start the school year. I've had multiple families calling today because they say, well, why do I have to register when I've already registered my student for school? I spoke to Karen today, and she was very, very kind and was able to change the wording on the website to say verification of information. We did it last year, and it eliminated a lot of the confusion. I have a lot of new families and K-4 families that are calling me saying, why do I have to register when I already registered? So if we could get in the habit of, at this time of the year, calling it verification of information versus registration. Thank you.
I just have to say, Laura, I did the same thing when I registered my daughter at Nicolay. I did the whole registration over, and they were like, registration denied because she's already registered. So I get what you're saying.
Thank you. I do appreciate that.
Okay, thank you very much. And our last one, again, I think Tracy Stetler.
I just feel like I need to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just feel like I need to press one more time that it might be important for the board to approve the handbook with an amendment.
Tracy, I'm going to interrupt you, Tracy. That ship has gone and sailed. It will be brought up again at the next board meeting.
But that's 5 days from the start of school. And we have parents who won't get the mailing by then.
Tracy, I hear you. It can't be done at this time in the board meeting.
Is there a way that we could hold a special board meeting later this week to make that so that these families have at least a week?
Board meeting, we have to give 24-hour notice, and I'm sure he's probably going to do that soon.
Right. So we voted, but with the understanding that we are able to dictate or allow for some of the process, the scheduling of in-person services, et cetera. I mean, I was unclear about how we will be doing that. So I do want to clarify what the process will be for the handbook, the edits, the semantics, et cetera. There are also big pieces in the handbook we didn't discuss, as in staff, whether we will require them in the buildings or not full-time versus encouraging, et cetera. But my vote was prefaced on the question Molly asked and Larry clarifying that we can still approve to the extent that the things we discussed, and that Shannon has the ability to start scheduling in-person services.
Danielle, that was the vote, but it was
no, the
voted
vote
down.
was to approve the handbook.
Right, with the amendment.
But Molly clarified, the amendment didn't address everything in the handbook, for example, the staff. But that being said, I thought Molly clarified that we were still able to have movement. Am I misunderstanding your question, Molly?
No, that's exactly what I asked.
So,
Yeah, and Larry said
we
yes.
and
Correct.
yes, we will make that happen.
Yes.
So how are we going to make that happen? This is my question. I need to understand the process
Sure, the
before
process
I
is
can.
the superintendent of the Glendale-River Hill School will mandate to Dr. Kilton that she does this. Just as I will mandate to the principals that they get the information out. We are never gonna let kids sit and not be serviced because of semantics. And then I'll bring the handbook back as you wish at the next board meeting. So Tracy, I guarantee that we will have in-person services for our most vulnerable kids immediately when we start school. That's the best I can say.
So if the board decided to meet sooner or call a special meeting, we could, the amendments and things, we could discuss the edits to the handbook, because I do believe it's important to get this information to our community. But I couldn't approve it as is and putting inaccurate information into the community. So I'm just trying to understand what the board's process, if we can discuss that some, if we are interested in meeting sooner
I don't think that's
to review changes.
Participation. I think that's up after this meeting. The board president can call a meeting given 24 hours notice at any given time, but it shouldn't be discussed in visitor participation.
Okay, well, I just wanted to be clear because I was very confused about that piece of it. And I would have raised it prior to adjournment and discussion anyway, so.
Thank you. Okay, there's no one else for visitor participation. So with that, I believe that we need to entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. All right, Molly. Aye. Tamika.
All right.
Danielle.
No.
Teresa.
I'm unclear about that.
No, a motion to adjourn.
I understand.
And
I know.
I'm sorry, and I think I got everyone in there. Molly, Tamika, did you say aye?
Yep.
Yes.
And I'll vote aye. So we'll adjourn for today. Everyone, thanks for coming, and we appreciate your input and your involvement.